Hey everybody, welcome home. I am your host of Native Land Pod, this solo pod anyway, Angela Rye. And today I sound happy, but I ain't that doggone happy because let me tell y'all, this right here is the Trump administration's executive order called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. Now, what I want to talk about today is the fact that this actually is not a new approach. What the Trump administration is doing is what white folks in this country been doing a long time, y'all. There's nothing new under the sun. The Bible says that, and so does our history, if we are allowed to continue to see that history. What's happening in this administration right now is mass erasure. And here's the thing. Some people say, oh, I didn't know it was going to happen. Why would they do that? What's the harm in knowing our history? I'm so glad you asked those questions. Here's the thing. There's a little thing that we've talked about on this podcast multiple times called Project 2025. It is all there. And if you can't find it in Project 2025, I dare you to Google Project 2025 and the Smithsonian. I dare you to Google Project 2025 and the National Park Service. You might be wondering, what the hell does the National Park Service have to do with this? Again, I'm so glad you asked. We're going to get into all that today and more. First, I want to just address this fact. Does the Project 2025 address the Smithsonian in and of itself? No. But the Heritage Foundation, which is the holder of Project 2025, the convener of Project 2025, how the authors of each section came together for Project 2025. Well, they have on their website in an article referencing 1619 and other things that what is going to destroy the fabric of this country is something called woke indoctrination. What the hell is that? Do y'all know? Neither do I. I have a feeling it has something to do with just teaching people Black history, just something to do with the books they think should be banned. Books like the 1619 Project, which the Heritage Foundation talks about in an article on their website. You should Google that too, Heritage Foundation 1619 Project. Why am I telling you all to go and look at what the enemy is doing? Some of y'all might be saying, why are you calling the enemy? Because anybody that's trying to erase you, steal, kill, and destroy who you are, the legacy of your people in this country, I'm pretty damn sure they're enemies. So why am I telling you to go look at what the enemy's doing? How are you going to prepare for the fight ahead if you don't know what's coming, right? There's only one way to prepare for the fight ahead. These folks put their playbook, they put their strategy on their website for all to see. They typed up 900 something pages about the direction that they think the country should go in Project 2025, so we should utilize it. Now, I want to bring this up because just last year, or over I'll say last 2 years, you all saw elected officials from both sides of the aisle, and we didn't have time to pull these clips, but maybe we'll do it on the back end. From both sides of the aisle, who could not say that America's a racist country. Do you remember that? And it was really frustrating to a lot of us because we're like, well, what country are you living in? Because clearly this country has racist history. It's rooted in racist history. You built your whole economy on the backs of enslaved people. Clearly there's racist history. And clearly when you look at George Zimmerman, who killed George Floyd, I'm sorry, that was a Freudian slip. George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, who was killed by Derek Chauvin, the many other ways in which vigilantes and the process by which vigilantes operated under the slave trade still exists to this day, right? When you look at that, you know that racism is still alive and well in this country. When you look at the disparities in pay between Black and white income earners, you know that racism is still alive in this country. When you look at the number of contractors, whether on the local, state, or federal level, and how much Black and brown participation, people of other ethnic backgrounds, the lack that exists there, the lack of access, the lack of process, and the lack of fairness and equitable outcomes in those spaces, you know that racism is still alive in this country. When you look at the publications, newspapers, media outlets, you know that racism is still alive in this country. It may be uncomfortable. It may be something that you want to look away from because it is painful for you to see the obvious. But we're not going to let you turn away, not on this podcast. So what I want to get into today is the fact that they actually put us in harm's way. by not being able to say that America is a racist country. Because what's happened as a result is Donald Trump's administration has been able to wrap certain words, woke, let me tell you what, Western foundations, what else do they have in here? We're going to go into this. Things around oppression. Any of those words are harmful to them, so they try to use something different. They would rather frame it as woke indoctrination. So they are offended. For example, this is the executive order called Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, right? They have on their in this executive order, on page 2 of this executive order, for example, the Smithsonian American Art Museum today features The Shape of Power, stories of race and American sculpture, an exhibit representing that societies, including the United States, have used race to establish and maintain systems of power, privilege, and disenfranchisement, right? This exhibit, it says the exhibit further claims that sculpture has been a powerful tool in promoting scientific racism and promotes the view that race is not a biological reality, but a social construct, stating race is a human invention. Now, they would have you believe that these quotes are not true. They would have you believe that centering race is a divisive tactic, which is what they say right above that. They would have you believe that in order to foster unity in this country and a deeper understanding of our shared past, that means that we have to get rid of what causes people shame, or what causes people guilt, or what causes people humiliation. But we have to come to terms with the fact that slavery was an awful institution, and it is the reason that many of us are here in this country today, because our ancestors were forced here, right, in the belly of slave ships in the transatlantic slave trade. And America was one of the places, the United States of America was one of the places where enslaved people were brought, but that's not the only place. The Caribbean, Brazil, the UK, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I think is important for us to kind of dissect here is, why is it that what does not feel good to white folks generally, particularly in this administration, is worth rewriting, right? We know that if they can destroy our history, they can destroy the legacy of our people, the remembrance and the memory of our ancestors. That is how you destroy things. And here's what I really think is beneath this. There's a bill that has been introduced in the United States House of Representatives every year since, I'm going to tell you the year, but that bill is a reparations bill. Congressman John Conyers began introducing the bill, I believe, in the late 1980s. I was trying to pull this. Yes. In the late 1980s, and 1989 is the first year that Congressman Conyers introduced H.R. 40. This bill was merely designed to establish a commission and to study the disastrous impacts of the transatlantic slave trade and the institution of slavery in the United States. Here's what I believe is happening. I don't believe that this executive order that Donald Trump signed at the end of March, on March 27th, I don't believe that they're only doing this to absolve themselves of white guilt. I don't believe that they want to get rid of artifacts and certain language in the Smithsonian and all of its properties because it makes them feel bad. I think that it's far more sick in its intention. I believe that if they can reframe slavery, if they can reframe the impact of institutional racism and systemic racism in this, and systemic oppression in this country, that that's a way for them to destroy any argument that has worked on the local, state, or federal level for reparations. I believe it is that it's that sick. They don't support reparations because the only people they support receiving handouts are rich billionaires, right? That's what we're seeing consistently across the board from this administration, that nobody that has given anything to this country and was not paid for it should be taken care of. And to that, I do want to say this too. A lot of people think that this executive order is just about what we call the Blacksonian, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's not. This is about all Smithsonian properties. That's 21 museums, and it is the world's largest institution of museum education, research, science. It is the world's largest. They want to destroy all of that. So they're using race as one of the inroads, but that's not the only inroad. And this isn't new. I want to go to this clip because I think it's important for you all to understand where some of this, not where it originated, but the fact that it didn't just pop up with the Trump administration. Let's roll this clip.
As we mentioned, Talking Points memo, Michelle Obama referenced slaves building the White House and referring to the evolution of America in a positive way. It was a positive comment. The history behind her remark is fascinating. George Washington selected the site in 1791 and as president laid the cornerstone in 1792. Washington was then running the country out of Philadelphia. Slaves did participate in the construction of the White House. Records show about 400 payments made to slave masters between 795 and 1801. In addition, free blacks, whites, and immigrants also worked on the massive building. There were no illegal immigrants at that time. If you could make it here, you could stay here. In 1800, President John Adams took up residence in what was then called the Executive Mansion. It was only later on they named it the White House. But Adams was in there with Abigail, and they were still hammering nails. The construction was still going on. Slaves that worked there were well fed and had decent lodgings provided by the government, which stopped hiring slave labor in 1802. However, the feds did not forbid subcontractors from using slave labor. So Michelle Obama is essentially correct in citing slaves as builders of the White House, but there were others working as well.
Child, what? Like the fact that we're talking about, and this was a big thing when it came up originally. It was a big thing because he said, well, you know, they were well fed and there was decent lodging for enslaved people, right? That's insane. We're talking about people who were brought to this country by force. He also said, if you know, there were no illegal immigrants, if you could make it here, you could stay here. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that what he's saying is at that point, there was no immigration policy. And certainly there was no repercussion for those who chained people into the belly of a slave ship to force them to come here and force them to work for free for centuries, right? We don't need to talk about reframing this as hired slave labor. There was no such thing. Enslaved people's masters were the ones receiving the benefit. He's talking about subcontractors. There's no subcontractor if you're not paid. I mean, well, actually, if you look at how some of these federal prime contractors work now and their subcontractors, yes, some of them don't see payment. And if you look at Donald Trump's history, certainly some of his subcontractors, even some of his overall contractors, didn't receive payment. So maybe that's just also a vestige of slavery. But I think the one thing that we do have to acknowledge here is that there is a rewriting of history that's been taking place for a long time to compensate for the guilt that white folks feel when you talk about the slave trade and when you talk about the institution of slavery. Now, the thing that I want us to recognize as we wrestle with what happens with the Smithsonian next is there's a black man, the first black man in history who's running that museum. Or that museum property. Again, we talk about Smithsonian as 21 museums plus all of the other things that they occupy as the world's largest entity of its kind. Lonnie Bunch is not safe from my vantage point. And I'm saying that because, you know, we're in a situation where They are attacking people. They've fired people from the EEOC that had terms that extended beyond that firing. Sure, folks can be taken to court to address the issues in those firings, the fact that they're illegal. But this administration, as we all know, doesn't care about doing things in a legal way, right? This is not about minding the law. We're the only ones that have to mind the law. The administration does not have to follow the law. And we need to be holding them accountable to that. But I think we need to also be clear about that. Now, that said, I want to turn our attention briefly to, because I don't know what the outcome will be with the Smithsonian properties. I'm hoping that Lonnie Bunch will be safe, but I'm very clear about the fact that a very qualified Black person in any role to this administration threatens their argument about DEI, and they are attacking things like science, like access to education, like employment, like the cost of goods, and certainly Black labor, when Black people have demonstrated that they actually are extremely excellent, deserve to be in those roles, and probably should have been promoted long before they actually were. They are replacing qualification and quality with nonsense, with the type of, as Tiff would say, nonsense, the type of people that put military strike plans in a doggone signal thread. That is what we're dealing with right now. So let me just turn briefly to a place where there was an attack and folks won on this attack. It's the National Park Service. So I think you all know, but every day I wear this chain. This is Harriet Tubman on my necklace. Harriet Tubman, to so many of us, and I dare not just say just Black folks, but when you talk about the Underground Railroad and what she means to our community, to this country, the type of person that John Brown could confide in around military plans and battle plans, the type of person that would go 19 times to get 300 people, 300 Black folks, the type of person who would say, there are a lot of folks where they might be running automotive service, the train, and her train, she said her train never went off the tracks and she never lost a passenger, figuratively speaking, of course. For those of you whose history has already been so erased, you don't know the Underground Railroad isn't actually the train tracks. And so the thing that I think is important now is, the National Park Service removed references to Harriet Tubman from the Underground Railroad page. And there is a victory on the other side of this, but I want to tell you, it says that the new page did not mention until slavery until the third paragraph, and that there were references to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 that were removed completely from the pages. That Harriet Tubman is not a central figure in the Underground Railroad, and a quote from her and her picture being taken down is remarkably it is the textbook definition of erasure, right? And so what I want to say is the victory around this is the National Park Service put it back. And why am I bringing that up to you all right now? I think it is so important for us to understand, as we get hit on every side. We get hit in our history, we're getting hit in our present day experience, and we're getting hit on what is accessible, attainable, and viable for future generations. We're literally getting hit on every side. As we consider that, I want us to think about how important it is to wage a fight back. It may be, y'all, that some people have to fight. Black people love a committee, especially Black church folk, especially Black church, Baptist church folks. And that is not shade in this moment, is actually a compliment, because this may be a moment where we need to divide up into committees to take on the labor. Somebody needs to be focusing on the attacks on future generations. Some folks need to be focused on what the attacks are in the present and how we, stave off any additional harm. And some people will need to focus on what has to happen to maintain our security and our history from a safety and security standpoint. Who can take on the fight for our history? Who can ensure it's not just the Blacksonian under attack? It is all of the Smithsonian property. So this should be a Rainbow Coalition fight. Like, at what point are you going to stop saying we're going to wait for the fight to take us on personally? It has. Women, our seniors, if you buy any products, it's on you. If you work for the federal government, it's on you. If you work for a quasi-governmental agency, that means kind of a public-private split, it's upon you. If you are a student, it is upon you. If you are a researcher, let's say you're in a PhD program where you need access to federal websites for data collection, it's on you. And if you're an art curator, collector, donor, it's on you, right? And there are so many other spaces, veterans, folks who rely on any type of what they call entitlement program, but SNAP benefits or Medicare or Medicaid, any type of need access to healthcare that you need, it's upon you. And so now is the time for us to be gathering, coming together, figuring out what our next steps and our response must be in this environment, because it is so treacherous and so dangerous, and it is only going to become more so the less we challenge them. And so I invite you into the fight. I will tell you a little bit of breaking news on here. It is not public yet, but we are announcing our State of the People tour. And the State of the People tour is going to begin in 10 cities. We're starting off in Atlanta, Georgia on April 26th. And we are saying we've got to come together. We've got to fight together. We got to be in coalition together. National partners across the board, from NAACP to NCNW to National Urban League, African American Mayors Association, across the board. Advancement Project. There's so many at the table so that we can get this right. The D9, right? We're doing this all together. The faith community, our young folks, we're working all together to ensure that our basic needs can be met and that we know how to fight in this environment, fight to preserve ourselves, to survive, and to get to the point of thriving. As we go on this tour, we're releasing Black papers every week that will become our Black agenda or our freedom agenda or our Project 2025. We need all hands on deck. So I want you all to reach out to us at stateoftheppl.com, stateofthepeople.com, stateoftheppl.com, though. Remember that. I keep messing that up. Because that is where you can sign up to participate, to volunteer, to host a workshop, all the things. We want to see you involved. And we definitely want to see you in a city near you. So this is our love letter to y'all. State of the People. There are local organizers doing the doggone thing in each city. And we're so excited to work with groups on the ground who've been doing this work. And we're also thrilled about the opportunity to come together, do something all together, and make our work that much more impactful. We are better together. One fist can strike a mighty blow, y'all. So with that, all power to the people. I'll see y'all soon. I'm not going to answer no questions because I done went long. I done got hot about this stuff. Y'all, we don't need to end with Bill O'Reilly, but just remember, they're trying to make history say that slaves were well fed and they had decent lodging. And we're going to tell them at every step of the way, the devil is a lie. We're going to make sure you know our history, even if it pains you to learn it. So thanks, y'all. We'll see you next time. Welcome home. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.